So thanks everyone for joining. This is the first of three of our financial literacy workshops. This one is focused on starting the money conversation. So um, I'm really excited to have our two great speakers here today. Joining us today. Before that, I just want to do a quick introduction. I am Hepsi Fonseca. I'm a volunteer at the NAYA Foundation. I head up the internship work stream. We do a lot of other educational workshops around that. This is one of them. I work to put this together with a bunch of volunteers. We have Madhu Ravindran as well on the phone, who's a big part of this. We also want to welcome some of our partner programs, organizations like First Gen Ahead and Ally Mentoring. I hope I'm saying that correctly, which is an organization based in Hawaii as well. So welcome to everyone who could join today. Objective of this workshop really is, to start as the title suggests, start the money conversation, creating good financial habits right from the get-go, right when our scholars are heading out into the world, and then even before that. Some great tips on how to do budgeting and just create good habits. As I said, we have two amazing presenters. I'm really excited to introduce to you Suzanne Norman and Andrew Astley. Andrew has, they both have a lot of financial experience. Andrew has a lot of global investment firms, has worked with a lot of big financial organizations here in the Boston area. And Suzanne is an educator and financial coach, and she also helps people with planning, financial investment and planning. So welcome to both Andrew and Suzanne. A quick housekeeping just before I pass it on to hand it off to Suzanne. The session is being recorded, so you will receive a chance to look back and review. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, the Q&A field. And if you're not speaking, please put yourself on mute so we can eliminate any background sounds. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Suzanne.
Thanks, Hepsi. Welcome, everybody. Ahado, welcome. I just saw you get into the chat, into the room. Hepsi has already introduced Andrew and I. So Andrew is going to control the slides for me. Thank you, Andrew. And he'll take the second half of the presentation. But it's a pleasure and a thrill to be here with you. I know it's a Sunday afternoon. So those of you that are here, we really want to acknowledge your commitment to learning. And we're coming into April, which is Financial Literacy Month, which is why the Anaya Tipnis Foundation had thought this would be a perfect time to offer some insights from Andrew and I. And we're representing the CFA Society Boston, as Hepsi mentioned, as well as the CFA Institute. And as you can see here, it is a very, very large organization. Boston's chapter was actually one of the founding chapters of CFA back in 1946, and it is a global institute. Andrew is a chartered financial analyst. You can see that in the blue bubble. I am actually a certified investment management analyst, which is another designation, but the CFA Society Boston is very welcoming for people that are in the industry. And as you can see in this first slide, Andrew's moved us to knowledge is power. And so today is, as Hepsi mentioned, our first of three. And Andrew, if you want to go into the next slide. Before we get started in some of the information that Andrew and I want to share with you today, we thought it would be good just to kind of baseline what financial literacy is. And so many of you, of course, are students, scholars within the foundation. So you understand what literacy is. You understand, hopefully, some elements of financial, aspects of your life. But financial literacy is really just kind of merging those two concepts together. So what we like to always say is that it starts with you, because when you think about managing money, of course, depending on where you end up in your careers, you may be doing that for an organization, but it really starts with you. So you're running your own kind of organization when you think about personal finance. And while we wish that this was taught in school, we have found that many schools aren't teaching this. So this is why CFA has stepped in with people like Andrew and I, who really are committed to not letting people just survive, but helping you thrive, because you'll have really strong financial financial literacy skills. So Andrew is going to stop right there. We thought because it's a Sunday afternoon, that we make it a little fun. So Andrew and I are each going to have a question, and those of you that answer in the chat correctly, the first person will be giving you a Starbucks gift certificate. But because we're still in Women's History Month, I thought I would actually start with a question that kind of shared some information on some women. But the first question is, who is credited with helping improve America's financial literacy effort? The first person, and A was that Thomas Brattle, and I went with a local, and I'm actually following centuries here from the 1600s. B, Benjamin Franklin from the 1700s. C, Madam C.J. Walker, or D, Maggie Lena Walker. And Hepsi, if you'll monitor the chat, and we'll see what answers we get here. And so basically we're looking to know who is the first person that we credit with bringing financial literacy skills to Americans. And Hepsi, I'll let you shout out, or Andrew. Oh, I see. Okay. I see Darren. Okay, thank you. I can see it on my screen. Good. So Darren's got C for Madam C.J. Walker, which is great. We'll wait for some more replies to come in. And by the way, she was the first female Black millionaire. So those of you who, I put links in the slides, by the way, Hepsi, so you can link into some of these people. So is anybody else out there brave enough? Darren's our only answer so far.
I think people are still waiting.
Okay, so I'm going to assume people are shy today. Ahado, good. Maggie Lena Walker, who actually was the first female, and I'm of course shouting out to my female empowerment here, who actually sponsored and chartered a bank in the United States. She was also Black. And so we'll keep moving along. As much as I would like it to be the ladies, it was Benjamin Franklin. So some of you, and if you do the next click, Andrew, you'll see it was hints for those that would be rich. So many of you know a lot of his aphorisms, but I thought I would kind of give a shout out to where this all began in the United States. And you can go to the next slide now, Andrew. Okay, so now the foundation again for any type of financial education is managing your inflows and your outflows. And a lot of that is done with budgeting. So we're going to go through a few key areas today. Certainly the purpose of a budget, how you set one up, and how you, of course, revisit it, because they do change. They're very dynamic. Understanding your paycheck, Andrew's going to go through some examples for you. We're going to talk about understanding expenses, kind of how to classify them, and then really practically how to get started. And we also have a little contest that Andrew's going to share with you at the end. And you can go to the next slide, Andrew. So I mentioned before, if you think about budgeting, everybody does it. So you may not be aware, but of course, a company has a budget, governments have budgets, not-for-profits like Anaya Tipnis have budgets, you have a budget. So it's really not a matter of, should I get involved in budgeting? You kind of have to, and maybe your job will ultimately, you'll be responsible for this, but this is really foundational for, again, how you manage money. And you can go to the next slide, Andrew. Okay, so when I think of a budget, we think of it as a spending plan, right? So you've got income and you've got expenses. And I mentioned already that there's a dynamic quality because you always have to reevaluate, and we'll go into some kind of terminology in a minute. But when you think about it, first thing is, where is the money coming from? What's your source of income? Is it somebody, an employer paying you? Is it you doing kind of an entrepreneurial effort, dog walking, babysitting, something where you're kind of offering that service yourself? You want to know how you're spending your money. And this is frankly one of the biggest things that trips everybody up. It doesn't matter whether it's a person or a company, but where's the money going? And then clearly back to this surviving and thriving concept of doing better than, you always want to have an eye towards what's left over, because you want to have an emergency savings account, of course, but you also want to have enough money left over so you can actually invest it. And the whole point of investing money is to let your money work for you. And you can go to the next slide, Andrew. So when we think about this budget, it's a lot of times people will say, how can I control my spending? And really it's a budget. They're kind of those kind of bumpers or the little boundaries. And think of bowling, back to, it's nice when it's kids because you've got the little things that come up and kind of keep you safe. And that's really what a budget's intended to do. So you're not spending money you don't have, you're identifying some bad spending habits. It happens all the time, especially with credit cards, which Andrew and I will talk about in one of our next sessions. But you want to have money for emergencies. Everybody has a goal. And right now it may be paying for college, but you also want to know, is it a need or is it a want? And then really having something written down helps assure that you'll reach those goals. And so that's what a budget can do. So this slide gets a little busy, but really it's kind of what I call a categorization slide. And so when you look at the top, you'll see in the green box, non-discretionary spending. What does that mean? And some of you may have seen this terminology before. A lot of times, governments, organizations use these terms. It's really just a need. It's something that, food, clothing, shelter, something that you have to have at a personal level to make sure that you survive. Discretionary spending, when we look in the gray box, is really a want. And this is, do I really need to have Netflix? Do I really need to go out to dinner? So these are things back to choices where you have a choice with discretionary spending. You may not have a choice with non-discretionary. The bottom, where you see the blue and the purple, is what really gets people kind of tripped up, frankly, with the budgets, because it's pretty straightforward to know what non-discretionary and discretionary are, needs and wants. But when you start thinking about what's it costing me, is it going to be a set fee in the fixed blue box where it's the same and I can kind of have consistency? Or is it going to be in the blue box, or excuse me, the purple box, and it changes? And so that's what gets tricky. And Andrew's going to talk about what that looks like in an example upcoming in a minute. You can go to the next slide, Andrew. So right now, I just wanted to kind of quickly, review need or want, and you'll see the expenses over in the left-hand side: concert tickets, rent, electric bill, Netflix, student loans, groceries. And Andrew, you can just kind of click through right now, need or want. So concert tickets, pretty right? It's a choice. You don't have to go. And rent, Andrew, loans. I'm going to say, even though we say it's a need, oh, there we go. I would say it could be very well a want. And why I say that, and Andrew and I are going to do this in one of our other lessons coming up in April, is that student loans are probably the last thing on the list. And looking at the foundation and Anaya Tipnis, you'd like other people's money first. So those could be scholarships, grants, and then going down to groceries, of course, food, clothing, shelter, groceries are definitely a need. And you can go to the next slide, Andrew. It may be my internet. I'm sorry. I don't see the next slide, but
I'm trying, just one second.
oh, that's okay. No, that's okay. I keep getting these internet alert things. Sorry. So the next.
Looks like we've lost Suzanne.
Going to look at
Suzanne, I think we've lost you.
Why don't I jump in for
Sure,
a second?
yeah.
And I'll walk through this. So just going back.
cheaper seats. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There you go. Great.
Okay, so you can click to the next slide, Andrew. So clothing, and sorry, the list is a little different here, but clothing, discretionary, non-discretionary, need or want, it depends, because of course, let's say that you had to buy clothing for your job, and let's say it's a uniform or an outfit. But then you decide that, oh, I really want to get a new coat. I don't need one, but I want one. And then the one thing that we have up here that I was looking at the slides earlier, and I actually changed it myself, is that if you look at the third item, electric bill. Now, like we mentioned, food, clothing, shelter tend to be needs, not wants. You need a roof over your head, you need to eat, you need clothing, but an electric bill, fixed or variable, I'm actually going to say is variable. And the reason I say electricity can change, and do is look at the gas pump right now. It can change. So it's not.
So
Isn't,
Suzanne, I'm gonna ask-
isn't Zoom fun?
Suzanne, if you want to just get your get off video, that way I think you'll probably be on a better bandwidth. I think sometimes that helps.
Okay, Hepsi, thank
Yeah.
you. Maybe that's me, sorry.
Yeah, okay. We see your picture. We know who
Okay.
you are. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think actually, Andrew, this is probably where I'm going to transfer to you anyway. So I will stay off video just to reduce the buffering. But Andrew, if you are in control of the slides, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, so the
Oh, sorry. Well, you can do that. Sorry, I forgot that slide was there. But go ahead.
so we've covered a lot here. So let's just review for a second. We've talked about needs, and they are AKA non-discretionary spends, and you can sort of see them on the page here in the top light blue. Wants, which are those things that, you know, everyone has to spend money on wants. And the last category is those things that prepare you for the future and are priorities for you being able to build a solid financial future. And so there's a rule of thumb that it's pretty universal, actually. It's used in a lot of different circumstances, which is you try to target in your budgets, and we're going to get into budgets here in just a second, 50% of your take-home pay at those things that are non-discretionary needs. And people say, well, gosh, that seems a little low. But you need to have, you need to have flexibility in your life to pay for things like the wants and the financial priorities. So in our budget discussion, we're actually going to be able to look at how the budget breaks out into these three categories. And so that'll be interesting a little bit. So let me move on to the next section. So here's another poll. This is get your fingers on the buzzer, because this is a Starbucks gift certificate question. And that is, and these terms you may not have heard before, but what income should you use to start your budget? Is it gross income? Or is it net income? And I will start to define gross and net here. Gross is the income that you get at the top of your paycheck. Net is the income that you get at the bottom of your paycheck, which says the money that you actually get paid in your paycheck. So which one should you use to set your budget? First one to answer gets a gift certificate. Use your chat button. Hepsi, you can jump in and let me know who's doing that. I'm not monitoring that, please.
Yeah, just wanted to say first person to answer correctly.
Yeah.
I was about to add that, yeah.
So again, the definition is gross income is the total amount you get at the top of your paycheck, which says before taxes and before all the other things that get taken out. And net income is the amount of money you actually get in your pocket. Which way would you set your budget? Would it be the amount you have in your pocket, or the amount that is at the top of the paycheck?
Okay, there's a 50-50
We have a lot of shy, we have a lot of shy people today.
Yep.
All right, we'll give the answer. Oh, Phoebe, good to see you.
Phoebe's just
give the
joining.
answer then.
Yeah. Okay, someone
Net
should.
So we may end up giving away some freebies here at the end. But net income, and the reason for that is it's the amount of money you actually have to spend, not the amount of money that before you pay taxes. You need to account for how much you actually have in your pocket in your budget. So let's keep moving. Net income is what you take home. So busy slides here, and so I'm going to try to make this come alive for you a bit. But on this slide, what we're trying to look at is what it looks like to get a paycheck, okay? And if you imagine your paycheck as being the box on the right, and we've broken it out into, normally you get a paycheck either weekly or bi-weekly. And so let's just use those. And so if you look at, and there's somebody that's not muted, if you wouldn't mind muting, that'd be awesome. If you look at the weekly, in this case, if a $35,000 salary goes down to, and a gross income, that's before taxes and everything, is 35,000 divided by 673. I mean, by 52 is $673 a month, excuse me, a week. And then guess what? You actually have to take out things called federal taxes and Social Security and other things that those numbers come up to be $134. And so it's not 673 bucks that you have in your pocket at the end of the week, but it's actually less than $134. That's income deductions for taxes. And then you actually make other contributions to things that help you, things like medical insurance or dental insurance or other things, including things like saving for your financial future. In this case, the example is $59 worth of other deductions. So you're paying for your medical insurance. I think we all would like to have medical insurance. And so that gets taken out of your paycheck as well. So at the end of the day, your weekly paycheck is $481. It's not 673. And that's why the question of net versus gross is why we set it up before. So I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there are any questions on what is a pretty complicated slide on your income. No questions? So now I'm going to just ask one other question. What happens when you get paid for babysitting and you get $100 for babysitting for the full day? Where does that net income or is that gross income? Anyone have an answer to that? Do you pay taxes on that? Let's see, there's somebody that chatted an answer. Darren said it, tax-free. Why is that? You're not paying the government anything for what you got paid for your babysitting. So it's a great deal. You get paid $20 an hour or whatever you get paid an hour, and you don't pay taxes on it. It all goes straight into income after deductions. So it's a great way to earn money is through side jobs and things that are tax-free. So let's keep going. If I can move on this page. So let's go to the budgeting side of this. So we've just talked about the paycheck and being able to look on your paycheck if you are working a summer job. And you see on that, you see your paycheck and you're looking for the net income after taxes. But let's talk about budgeting. You may have a job, as we talked about here. In this case, we called it a full-time job for $2,000. You may have a work study for $175, but we also talked about other sources of income, things like babysitting, side jobs, dog walking, doing lots of different things that people get paid money for. Could be other sources of funding that come through grants, for example. And all of those things add up to your sources of income. And in this case, and I think in most budget cases, people figure out their budgets on a monthly basis. And so we're trying to figure out for you guys, let's add up all of those places where you're getting paid money, and that'll start your budget process from an income perspective. I'll pause there, but let's move on to the other side of that, which is the expense side. So this is a really complicated slide, and we're going to ask to work on this in a little bit, but there are all sorts of forms of monthly expenses. And what we're going to try to do here is get yourself thinking about not just the left-hand side, which we just did, which is income in this lower left-hand box, but also all the forms of things you have to pay for. Now, when you're in college, maybe you don't have rent. Maybe you contribute to the rent to your family, in which case there would be something in your budget. Maybe you don't have heat and electricity, but you probably pay for a cell phone. You certainly probably pay for transportation to and from school in the summertime or to your job. And so just looking through this list, there's a whole bunch of what we called, again, needs and wants. So the needs side are those that you just have to do. It may be rent. It's very likely transportation. It's paying down debt. It's things like groceries. And there's a lot of things here that are the discretionary side, which are things like cable TV, Ubers, entertainment, Netflix, those sorts of things. So the goal that we're trying to do is compare the left-hand side, the income side, which is pretty straightforward monthly, to your expense side, which is a little more complicated because sometimes you buy clothes, sometimes you don't. And it's hard to sometimes estimate without writing it down how much you spend on groceries or how much you spend on entertainment. So this is the basic framework for thinking about it. On the right-hand side, you think about how much you have coming in, and on the left-hand side, you have how much is going out. And we're comparing the total of what comes in this case, in this example, $2,175 a month to the total expenses going out, which is $2,033. In this case, you've got a positive net of $142, that you've done a great job at budgeting, and you actually didn't run over your budget. You're a little, you spent a little less than what you had available to spend. So let's talk about it in a little more depth. What happened, you know, in the first process, we said, let's estimate what those costs are. And now this process, the second part of that is, let's actually check to see whether we were right or not. And if we go to look at the left-hand side, the lower left-hand side, you're going to say, gosh, I thought I was going to make $2,000 a month for my job and $175 for work study. But as it turns out, I actually made a little bit more in work study. And so your budget from an income perspective in this case was a little off, but not really too far off. You had an extra $50 during that month. That's pretty good estimating. If you look at the right-hand side, you had estimated a whole bunch of costs, and I'm not going to go through many of those. But one of the areas you did was you budgeted $50 for clothes, but you actually only ended up spending $20 for clothes. That's a difference where you made a positive contribution, but you also spent too much money, or you spent more than you thought you were going to spend on food. And so overall, your budget, where you thought you were going to be positive by $107, you ended up being short by $35. Again, not bad, pretty close. And actually a really good way of saying, gosh, my estimates were pretty good, but where would I refine my budgets for the next month? And it may be in areas like my discretionary spending and takeout, where you spent $50 more than you thought, or in areas like I spent a little bit more in entertainment than I thought I was going to. And so in order to get yourself back in alignment for a budget, you got to find $35 in order for you to be back on budget. And the areas you can look are usually not discretionary, not non-discretionary. You can't change what your rent's going to be, but you can change how much you spend on discretionary things like clothes, entertainment, subscriptions. And so that's how you think about how you rebalance your budget. Again, lots of numbers on a page. I think it's worthwhile to stop and pause here to see if there's any questions from the group in the chat session. Hepsi, do you see any?
No, I think we're good, but this is a great list. I mean, I think just having a sense of where your money is going. Now, Andrew, do you recommend writing down a budget, and what is the way to capture, and track how you where your money is going? Those would be great to talk about.
Yes, I think so. We've covered the periodic review for income, and here we are on page 26 here. Is sticking to a budget is tough. It's the first thing we're going to ask you to do actually as a group here is to write down what you estimate your budget to be. And you could write it down in three different types of places. One is you can make a list on a piece of paper, and you can write down your expenses on one side using, if you go back to this list here, you can use a list like this and write it down. Another way to do it, and the example that we're going to share with you today, is to use a spreadsheet like Excel, and where it'll calculate for you these categories after you plug them in. We definitely recommend that, and do that on a monthly basis. The third way, and a really interesting way, is to make it easy for you, and I'll just jump ahead, is to use an app. And there are lots of them out there that help you do exactly this, which sort of take in information and then automatically calculate based on how you input in it. It's a really easy way of doing this, and we can talk you through some of these apps that are available.
Andrew, I was just going to mention, or Hepsi, in the chat, Ahato and I had a conversation recently about ones that she was familiar with. So I was just curious in the chat if people could mention, Andrew, if you want to go back to that list, who might have some familiarity with these, and if you're using them, and if you like it.
Also, my question would be, are all of these free based on what our experiences, or are they?
I would say many of them, Hepsi, are free to download, but will have varying degrees of subscriptions.
Right.
Yeah, so And that's a great question. I'm not sure out of this list which one allows you to use their app and ongoing inputs for free, but that's what we're going to show you in a minute. Is another way to get it for free. We have a spreadsheet that people can use as well.
Okay, so what I feel like is that we have made a very complex topic go very high speed. But here are some of the things to make this process. And again, we're going to ask you to do this, and there's going to be a prize at the end of the third session where we are going to actually not review your budgets, because we don't want you to put you on the spot and have to say, we made this much money and spent this much money. It's going to be the honor system. But what we're going to ask you to do is actually do it for the month of April. And so start a budget and estimate your costs. And then we're going to show you how to do that. And one of the ways to do that is to think about it as, what are the most important things you know, and write those down first. And then monitor yourself. And in the case of April, we're going to ask you to actually think about adding those numbers to your list on a weekly basis. It's adjusting, and you're going to see, oh man, I spent a little bit more than I thought I was going to. And then at the end of the month, you'll be able to compare what you thought your budget was to your actual budget. And it'll help, I think, frame where you are from a financial picture and what kind of decisions that you can make. So that's what our recommendations, because this is a tough thing to do if you don't do it with regularity. And so let's start what you do. You got to know what your income is. What are the sources of that? In your cases, it's probably 2 or 3 places. It may be grants. It may be in the form of babysitting or other kind of ad hoc things, and it may be in the form of work study or other areas. Now, don't include those things where you know, scholarships where you're paying for school, because that's not really disposable income. It's not money that you can spend. But we're going to try to look at income relative to the expenses that you are required to spend for your household. The second
And
thing
I'm just going to add to that, Andrew, you know, with you know, income maybe not being one of the things that you have a lot of at this point. We're certainly going to have an ask at the end that really wants you to share what you've learned. So if you're comfortable asking a friend, a family member to show you their budget, this is something that could be very instructive for them as well. So I would just add that.
Yep. The second thing on this, so it's is to really think about those things you absolutely have to pay for versus those that you want to pay for. So in any budget, the first thing you got to do is have enough to pay for the things that you absolutely need to pay for versus those that you want to. And again, it's called non-discretionary versus discretionary. We can call it needs versus wants. The next thing is, you know, any budget that runs to zero means that you don't have any money if you had an emergency or if you miscalculated. So put a little aside, if you can, towards those things that either you want more discretionary things to buy, or that you run into something like, gosh, you needed to go home for something that you didn't plan for and you had to buy a train ticket. So that's thing. And then the next thing on this list, and we're going to get into this in the second session, is credit cards are dangerous. They're really great in certain ways, but they can be dangerous. So before you go out and buy something that's discretionary, if you can think about it for 24 hours, or if it's a really big ticket item, if you can think about it for 30 days, it often changes your perspective on whether you really need it. And lastly, it's easy to get loose about this and track only the big items. It's really helpful for 1 month and 1 month only to track everything. And so that's our recommendations on budgeting tips. So let's go through this and think about it. When we're going to recommend that how frequently you think about your budget is on a monthly basis. It's a short enough period of time that it's bite-sized. It's not so frequently that you have to divide by 365 and do it on a daily basis, and it's sort of not very helpful. We're understanding where your sources of things come from and writing those down, really grouping things into those that are discretionary and non-discretionary, and then adjusting and planning. Those are the kind of things that I think are really great to start the process of budgeting. Anything you'd add to that, Suzanne?
No, I think that that covers it, and I'm eager to show them the spreadsheet.
Okay, so let's do it. So
Okay.
here's, let me try to switch screens here, which for all of you that do these screen sharing stuff in your normal life, it's sometimes hard to do. So let me try to switch things. Where am I? Okay, come on, let's go. Let's see if it works. Everyone see a spreadsheet now?
Yes.
Great. So we just said that we're going to talk about monthly, and let's play a little game. And so we're gonna spend time and start with a monthly budget here, and we're going to think about the order at which we start to spend money. In this case, the example that we have is that this person has a $35,000 annual wage net. This is after taxes, and a $2,917 net monthly wage. So we're talking about a monthly number. And granted, this is person XYZ, you may not have those numbers, but you also won't have the same kind of expenses that are associated with it. So let's play around a little, and I'd like to have somebody that's on the line here talk about where are the most important non-discretionary costs that somebody that has $2,917 per month needs to pay for.
You can just put it in the chat.
It's funny how long I can be silent in order to sort of
Yeah.
get somebody.
And Andrew, just for those who are not necessarily used with the terms discretionary and non-discretionary, if you can just kind of quickly repeat
Yeah.
what those are.
Sure. So we're talking about those things that you have to do that you can't pass up. So rent would be one of those things. Those things that are not nice to haves. It's a want. It's not a want. It's a need. So we're trying to figure out the most important things you have to pay for in a budget, and those are the needs, not the wants. So what are on this list of things that you can see on this page? What are those things, if you're a person that has this kind of budget, needs to pay for right out of the gate? The most important stuff.
We have a shy group today, Andrew. So I'll say that it definitely falls into the category. Oh, okay, we have a hand
Phoebe.
raised, Phoebe.
Hi, I would
Hi,
definitely
Phoebe.
say, hi, I would definitely say electricity or gas, because you need your gas to be able to go to work, and you need electricity to
Yeah,
charge like your laptop, things like that you need to work.
Yep, that's awesome. And again, we talked about, thank you, Phoebe. Electricity and gas are really important. So you know, if you're living in an apartment and you don't have electricity, then your heat doesn't work, and it's hard to live there. And so this is one of those things that is a need. And let's just make a guess. We used an estimate before, but let's just put in $150 for electric and gas, because I think that's actually a pretty reasonable number. Not 1,500, but 150. Any other? So thank you for that, Phoebe. Anyone else have areas here that you have?
Anara has said monthly rent, Andrew.
Okay, so what's a good guess here on monthly rent if you are spending, if you have a monthly income of $2,917, maybe we could use this rule of thumb.
I was going to say 50% of that. We have some really good STEM students, scholars on the line. So what's 50% of 2,900?
Well, that would be the maximum if that was the only thing you were spending on.
Yeah, well, true. Within the 50%. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah. And then Phoebe actually had a really good point, which is rent is definitely going to depend on where you live.
Right.
And
Exactly.
Boston is she's
Super
saying
expensive.
1,000. Yeah.
Right. So let's say 1,000, because I think 1,000, if you're making $2,917 a month, then 1,000 is almost as much as you could possibly spend on rent, given that you have other costs. Okay. And we can play this through, and we're going to see how it works, because there's actually a financial picture down here that we'll draw up. Anything else here that people, I'd love to get one or two items here. Like
Aaron
let's-
has said groceries, Andrew.
Oh, groceries, great. So what do we think is an estimate for a month's worth of groceries for you guys? Is that 200, 250?
Things are going up. We haven't obviously had our comments related to inflation, but yes, I would say 250 is probably.
Okay, so let's do this and we can play with this. This is the beauty of this spreadsheet. So, all right, I'm going to say one other thing. People that have phones, do you have to have a phone in order to live these days?
Yep.
I
And
think
Andrew,
it-
I was just going to say, Phoebe actually just had another great comment in the chat. What she was flagging is 250, but it's going to depend on how many people are being fed, right? So is that
That's absolutely
250 for
true.
one person, or, you know, and I was also saying phones are essential.
Right. So I think in the end of the day, what we're trying to do is do an exercise here. It's hard to get into all the details. Phoebe, you're absolutely right about this, that there's a lot of variability in some of these expenses. But at the end of the day, if you have that number of wages for net wages, I think what we're going to see is we fairly quickly run into some non-discretionary costs or needs that take up a big chunk of that. So if we got a mobile phone, and I don't know what people pay a month for mobile phones, but let's say it's $50. I think it's something like that. It may be a little low, maybe a little high. We can figure that out. Internet. Do you have to have internet in order to live in a house these days?
Yes.
Probably. So let's call that $60. And again, I don't know what the answers are. We're playing with this, but this is what we're going to ask you to do, is actually find these things out and try to put them in a spreadsheet. So let's just do a little guess, see where we're at. The monthly spend, and I'm looking at 44 here. Our monthly spend so far is $1,510, and the remaining amount is $1,407. Okay. And we've gone through this list of things that so far, what we've talked about is only things that are required, that are needs. And the other word is what? Non-discretionary. So now let's go into the category of things that are discretionary. And maybe there's some things we missed here in non-discretionary needs. Public, do you have to get from point A to point B?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know, what is an MBTA monthly pass cost?
We actually had a class recently, Andrew. I don't think it was with this group, but anyway, there's a student MBTA cost. So somebody in the chat may know, because maybe you're paying it, but it was significantly reduced. So, you always want to look for discounts. I always joke that my two favorite words are sale and free. So always ask.
Anyone have any idea how much? Because I think transportation, now granted you're in school, but in the summertime, you can't just walk everywhere. Maybe you can, but let's say, I don't know what that number is, but let's say in the transportation bucket, there's $100. That's low. I'm assuming it's a student price. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about discretionary costs. There are some things you want, and we don't have a ton of them listed here, actually. But let's go down to, I see a chat here. What did we say? You would estimate 50 is what Phoebe says. So let's throw
Yep.
$50 in there, because I think it's good to get it a little lower. Okay, 50. How about down in the health area? Anyone get their hair cut every once in a while? Do you do that at home? Or do you get somebody to cut your hair? Just in case anyone's wondering on here, I cut mine at home.
Yeah.
Andrew, you
wanna
don't cut it,
say.
you buzz it.
I know a lot of great YouTube videos that show how to do your own hair. So there's an option,
Yeah.
so it could be easier.
Let's just say that, let's say that you don't do that. How about dining out? Do people go out and get everything from from Dunkin' Donuts to a hamburger every once in a while? How much do you spend on that a month? It's kind of nice to do.
Phoebe says yes, but then she makes a sad face. So I would add something there, Phoebe, which is, I think Andrew and Hepsi and Madhu and I would always say, the goal again is following 50, 30, 20, meaning a very Spartan lifestyle may not make you a very happy person. So I would say, don't feel sad if you are enjoying yourself and having some wants, wants, because it's very difficult to just live a needs lifestyle.
Right.
So that's my 2
So I'm
cents.
going to just assume that just for the sake of this, and we're going to, we have a little about 10 minutes. So I just want to make sure that we have a chance to sort of answer any questions and round this out. We're going to assume that things like healthcare have been answered by either your job or through your school. And so these, but when you move out of school, these become really big costs. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that move over into the discretionary area. But gym memberships, you know what? It might be nice to have a gym membership, and that's $20. Actually, you can go to Planet Fitness, that's $10 a month. And you might have a student loan, but you haven't had to start paying for that yet. So let's leave that off. But what about other wants? Do you have clothes? Do you have, I mean, there are other things that life is full of. Buying a birthday present for somebody that you're fond of, going to movies, that sort of thing. So let's put in, because life is full of things that are fun, let's put in a couple $100 there. And let's just take a look. And we see at this point, why is it not calculating correctly? Well, I might have to recalculate. But the idea here is these things add up. And what you see is on this page, it starts to show how much of your income that you're spending on non-discretionary versus discretionary. And in this case, what you'll see is a really large percentage of your income that you had at the top are going towards non-discretionary. And what we'd like to see, if once you get a really stable financial picture, is that you start spending a little less on non-discretionary, thinking about maybe you move into an apartment that's a little less money. Maybe you spend a little less on things like you go from electric heat to gas heat, and that changes your heating situation. And so once I have edited this budget, because it doesn't look like it's calculating correctly, what we'll show you in this budget spreadsheet that we're going to send to you is you're going to be able to see where the flow of your income goes into the buckets of needs, wants, and saving for the future. And I think that'll be helpful as you start to think about, is your budget something that's sustainable or not sustainable on a go-forward basis? Any questions on that? And I apologize for the calculations not working out right this second to add up to, because I'm pretty sure this number is, well, it might be that we've underspent, but I don't think so. Yeah, it might be actually that we've underspent by that much money. So actually, in this case, it might be that you could spend $1,500. Let's see if the rent, if you moved up into a bigger apartment, guess what? We still have $500 left in this particular budget. Let's say that this person decides they have a car and their car payment is $150 a month. But guess what? Insurance costs you $75 a month. Well, we're now down to $320. Well, now maybe you say, I'd like to spend a little bit more in discretionary spending, or guess what? A topic we didn't do. We haven't saved anything. So here it would be an opportunity to say, I feel pretty comfortable on what I've got in all these categories, but I really would like to have that rainy day fund. And you say, you know what, let's put $150 into that rainy day fund. And voila, you're kind of at almost a break-even budget. You've got $172 left. Maybe you forgot some categories. Actually, I do get my hair cut. I actually do have to buy toothpaste and other grooming supplies and all that sort of stuff. And maybe I need to have that variability in case I've made an error in my calculation. So
Andrew, can I jump in for just a second,
please.
and just maybe offer a tip for everybody? Because one thing that is another way you can do a budget is, certainly all these inputs, and what's fun about this spreadsheet is, you can play around with it, and it's ours to you. But with the savings, there's the mantra, pay yourself first, and the benefit will go into this in some of the other classes and lessons. But the ability for you to earn compound interest on your savings when you're young, especially if it's a retirement savings account where, there is no tax while it's growing. The point I'm making is you could play around with that savings because 20% of that net take-home pay is almost $600. It's $583 a month. So a lot of people, that's sort of a savings hack, say it's actually a need. It's not a want. So that's just something to be thinking about as you try to work through. Because what I liked about this, Andrew, is that we were sort of miserly and being, very cautious with our spending. And we had a lot left over. And that's, I think, the whole message of a budget is that when it's on paper, it becomes real. And certainly with a savings goal, which most people have, if you make it a need, not a want, and you pay yourself first.
Yep. So we're about 5 minutes through. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to send you this doc. We're going to send you this. We're going to send you all the background materials. We're going to ask you to plan a budget. And then we're going to ask to see how that budget's going to flow through to this actual versus planned. And then we're going to see these numbers that you calculate on this first page will show against your budget. And then you're going to track them against actual, and we'll have those calculations flow through. And we're going to be able to see by discussion, not about the actual numbers. We would never ask you about your actual numbers. We're going to ask you about the process of thinking about that budget. It won't be for next session, but for the third session of the group, those that have gone through the process of starting a budget and then tracking against the actual, we're going to give a significant prize for that. And because we think it's important for you to really think about how money matters to you and where the buckets are. So with that, I think we'll pause and see if there are any questions for the group here. And hopefully you've benefited from this discussion so far.
As people are putting in their questions, I just want to say, it's reiterate and underscore the importance of just capturing it on paper, because I think I had a big smile on my face when I heard the comment from Phoebe saying, we spend more than we should on Starbucks, for instance. And then you'll say, oh my God, I didn't realize I spent so much on Starbucks, and do I need to? So every time you go for that, grande cafe latte, and it's like 5 something or 6 something, and you're like, okay, 6 times, 5 times a week, 5 times, 20 times, in the month adds up, right? Little by little adds up. And so whether you could put that aside and use
Pepsi,
it.
you make such a good point, which is, Andrew and I didn't mention this before, but multiplying that as we've been talking about, the managing a budget tends to be easier to do monthly, and certainly a lot of bills are due monthly. But if you take the cost of that, whatever that coffee was, sorry, Pepsi, I can't remember because I was thinking of something.
I don't know. Yeah, $6.
But take $5.
Yeah.
And multiply. I mean, be honest with yourself. Is it every day? And basically multiply it by 365 days. And when you see that big number, the problem is that this is where it's the insidious nature of spending money. And this is where a lot of companies and credit cards get you, is that it's little, right? It's back to that allegory of the frog in the boiling water. Yeah. It turns up slowly.
Right.
Aaron asked a good question in the chat, and it was like the hardest thing is capturing your actuals versus your budget. And one thing and he asked if there's any apps that help with that. Almost all, if you have debit cards, and so we'll talk about the difference between a debit and a credit card. But if your money is in a bank and you use a debit card to spend, and that is you're taking it directly out of your account. Most credit cards most debit cards allow you to view that spending by category. So you can go back for the period, let's say April 1st to April 30, and see if you chose to try to do most, if not all, of your spending via debit card. You can have most banks will then categorize that spend, and it makes it a lot easier then to be able to look at it relative to your budget. So that may be helpful as one way.
One other thought, Andrew, I had, which is great, because yes, I mean, most of these will have the ability to categorize, but what I might be taking away from that question as well is another hack, which is, setting up a limit on your credit card, so that you can't spend more than, $500, $100, whatever that is. Because that can also put those bumpers up, right? So that, you're restricted. And certainly pre-pandemic, one of the budget tips that everybody had was cash. And not that that's always the safest thing, because obviously you can lose it, it can be stolen, but that can certainly connect you a lot faster to your spend. Because this is what's happening with the kind of credit card culture, is that it's mindless. It's kind of like it's binging.
Just to add to that for one last point, back to Darren's question, another way of thinking about potentially your entire discretionary spend is don't spend any of that on a card of any kind and spend only in cash. And that way you know exactly what you spent discretionary, because you go to the bank, you got $50 out. At the end of the time, when you no longer have $50 in your pocket, you don't care whether that was for coffee or for movies. You just know it was discretionary. And that way you can say that everything else that I spent was on things that are categorized very likely to be in the non-discretionary space. I'm recognizing our time.
That's right.
And I'm hopeful that's helpful, Darren.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to say thank you to Suzanne and Andrew. A lot of thought and time has gone into putting this together, so much appreciated. We do have the privilege of having them as one of mentors on the Anaya Foundation. So definitely, ping us, send your question either directly to Andrew and Suzanne, or you can just put workshops@anayafoundation.com and it'll come and we will redirect them. I just wanted to give a quick plug for also our next session, which is on April 10th. More conversations around financial foundations and giving you some more tips and tools regarding credits and credit scores and how do you protect your money. There's a lot of fraudulent activity, so being on top of your credit accounts and making sure that you are actually seeing spend that is you've done and not someone else. So lots of great information there. So thanks again. And again, this will be put as a recording on the Anaya Foundation share. And also we will send you a copy of the slides as well as the spreadsheet. So don't forget to fill it in for next time. And I know
The financial literacy calendar.
That's right. And we do have an organized, we will send you a financial literacy calendar, which is the CFA Society of Boston puts together a lot more tips and helpful sessions. So definitely look at that and see if you'd like to join in. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of the afternoon. And thank you for your time here.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.